Soot drifted through the air like unsettled memories as steam hissed across Paddington Station, blurring the edges of the crowd until every figure became a passing shadow. Among them stood Isabella Harcourt, 21 years old, beautiful in a quiet, almost disarming way, though her lowered gaze tried desperately to conceal it. She clasped a carpet bag, so worn at the seams it seemed ready to surrender, much like the fragile hopes she had carried into London only days earlier. Her dismissal from Lady Penberry's household still echoed through her mind with humiliating clarity, the clipped tone of accusation, the whispers of impropriety she could not defend herself against, and the firm decree that she was to leave before nightfall. Now she waited alone on the platform, trembling not from cold but from shame, and for the terrifying suspicion that her skill, her one treasure, would no longer grant her a place in any respectable home. The station pulsed with noise, iron wheels grinding, porters shouting, gentlefolk issuing demands with impatient flutters of gloved hands. Yet Isabella heard none of it. Her world had shrunk to the uneven planks beneath her feet and the dread rising through her chest. She had nowhere to go and no assurance that any household would hire a cook whose name was already shadowed by gossip. She feared even approaching employers. She could not bear the moment their polite expressions stiffened upon hearing her history. She wiped her cheeks with the back of one trembling hand, determined to master herself. She had always believed dignity was a woman's final shield, even when all else was stripped away. But dignity bent under the weight of disgrace, and she felt herself sagging with it. She whispered a small prayer for courage, though her voice scarcely rose above the clatter around her. A gust of wind swept across the platform, scattering newspapers and tugging loose strands of her dark hair. The gust seemed to precede the arrival of a tall figure striding from the first-class carriages, a young man whose bearing parted crowds without a word. His coat was impeccably tailored, his boots polished despite the grime of travel, and his eyes, searching and sharply intelligent, carried the somber shadows of a man accustomed to responsibility heavier than his years suggested. Isabella did not notice him at first. She was too focused on steadying her breath. But he noticed her. Duke Alastair Hawthorne had come to the station with two aims: to secure the services of a cook whose reputation had reached him through a trusted steward, and to escape the suffocating gloom of Hawthorne Hall, where the memory of his late wife lingered in every corridor. He had expected a capable woman, perhaps older, perhaps stern. He had not expected the fragile figure standing alone near the edge of the platform, her beauty muted by sorrow, her posture tense as if bracing against an unseen blow. He paused, studying her with a mixture of curiosity and recognition. Her name, Isabella Harcourt, matched the one he had been given, though he had been told only that she was skilled, honest, and recently wronged. Nothing had prepared him for the vulnerability he saw in her face, nor for the instinctive desire to shield her from further harm. Isabella felt a presence beside her before she dared to look. When she finally lifted her gaze, she found the Duke standing before her, his expression solemn yet not unkind. She stiffened immediately, unsure whether to curtsy, speak, or flee. "Miss Harcourt?" he asked, his voice low enough to feel private despite the surrounding noise. Her fingers tightened on her carpet bag. "Yes, my lord." Her voice wavered in a way that made her flush. "I am Duke Hawthorne," he said. "I believe you are aware that my steward inquired after your availability." She nodded, though truthfully she had not expected the inquiry to continue after her dismissal. "I had hoped, but circumstances have changed, your grace." "I am aware of those circumstances," he replied, and something in his tone made her breath hitch. There was no judgment in it, only a quiet conviction that the matter did not lessen her worth. "I will be direct, Miss Harcourt. My household is in immediate need of a cook, and I have been told you possess uncommon skill. I am choosing you to cook for 1 week." The words struck her with almost physical force. Several passengers turned, startled by the notion of a duke selecting a distraught young woman from the middle of the station. Isabella felt dozens of unseen eyes upon her, and instinctively stepped back. "My lord," she whispered. "I do not wish to bring trouble to your home. There are rumors." "Rumors," he interrupted gently, "are the sport of idle tongues. I'm not interested in them. I'm interested in your ability and your character." He held her gaze steadily. "Both, I believe, remain intact." Her heart fluttered painfully. She wanted to trust him, yet fear chained her thoughts. Accepting his offer might save her future, or ruin him through association if scandal followed her to his doorstep. "I cannot be the cause of difficulty for you," she managed, though it pained her to refuse what might be her only chance. "You will not be," he said with steady calm. "And even if you were, I would choose to bear it. My household has endured far greater hardships than the arrival of an honest cook." His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. "Miss Harcourt, you deserve the opportunity to reclaim what was taken from you." His words pierced through the fog of her despair. She searched his face, trying to understand why a man of rank would extend such generosity to a stranger. Yet his sincerity felt unmistakable, a steady anchor in a world that had recently offered her nothing but cruelty. "Very well," she whispered. "I will come." A faint nod of satisfaction crossed his features, though he remained composed. He offered his arm, a gesture that startled her with its unexpected courtesy, and she hesitated only a moment before placing her hand upon his sleeve. They walked toward the waiting carriage, past the curious glances of onlookers. As Isabella stepped inside, she felt the station's cold air recede, replaced by an uneasy warmth. The Duke settled opposite her, his posture refined yet tinged with an exhaustion he did not attempt to hide. The carriage lurched forward. London's grimy streets blurred past the windows, but neither spoke. Isabella watched the city fade, feeling the uncertainty of her future unravel in a slow, tremulous thread. Alistair studied her reflection in the glass, noting the quiet resilience beneath her fear. Somewhere between the clatter of wheels and the rhythmic sway of the carriage, Isabella sensed that her life had shifted course. Whether toward salvation or deeper peril, she could not yet tell. But for the first time since her dismissal, she felt a fragile, flickering hope, one she scarcely dared to breathe upon, lest it vanish into smoke like everything else. The carriage approached Hawthorne Hall through a long avenue of lime trees whose leaves shimmered faintly in the late afternoon light. Isabella gazed at the estate with a mixture of awe and dread, for its grandeur felt both breathtaking and intimidating. The manor rose in stately tiers of pale stone, its windows catching the sun like watchful eyes. Though elegant, there was an unmistakable sense of neglect about it. Bushes grown too wild, shutters in need of paint, and a silence that felt deeper than a noble home ought to hold. She sensed the place had once known joy, and that joy had left abruptly, leaving rooms to echo with whatever sadness remained. When the carriage stopped, a small assembly of servants hurried forward. Their greetings to the Duke were polished and dutiful, but their glances toward Isabella shifted between curiosity and disapproval. She stepped down carefully, trying to hide her nervousness, but she could feel judgment pressing against her from every angle. The housekeeper, Mrs. Fenton, surveyed her with cool, assessing eyes, giving only the barest nod before ordering a footman to take Isabella's bag. Alistair introduced her with calm authority, stating that Miss Harcourt would serve as cook for 1 week, effective immediately. Mrs. Fenton's lips tightened, for she had clearly expected another candidate, someone vetted and untainted by rumor. But she voiced no objection. Her station did not permit it. Still, Isabella felt the chill in her manner and understood it would not thaw easily. She was shown to the kitchens, a sprawling network of stone floors, copper pots, and heavy wooden tables. The staff she met there, scullery maids, a pair of junior cooks, several footmen bringing provisions, offered polite but distant nods. They knew the Duchess's memory lingered in every hall, and they knew too that any new presence near the Duke would be scrutinized mercilessly. Isabella sensed she was already being measured, weighed, and found wanting. Her first task came swiftly. Dinner was only hours away, and the household expected a full table, as the Duke maintained his habit of inviting local landowners on short notice. Isabella worked with practiced efficiency, immersing herself in the steady rhythm of chopping herbs, kneading dough, and basting pheasant with spiced butter. As she moved, she felt the eyes of a younger maid, Alice, watching her with tentative admiration, while others observed with guarded caution. She did not mind. Judgments could be softened, but only through competence and consistency. Alistair appeared briefly at the doorway, observing her in silence. Isabella felt his gaze like a warm ember at her back, but dared not turn. When she finally allowed herself a glance, he nodded once, a quiet reassurance that steadied her hands. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, something neither would acknowledge aloud. The dinner proved a success. The guests praised the meal with unguarded enthusiasm, remarking on the flavors and balanced simplicity. Isabella stayed in the kitchen, hearing muffled compliments through the floorboards, but she did not bask in them. Praise might soothe one moment and turn to suspicion the next. She had learned that lesson painfully. Later, as the candles dwindled, Alistair returned to the kitchen carrying a small parcel wrapped in linen. Isabella paused in her cleaning as he approached her table and set it down with a measured gentleness that made the staff glance furtively between them. She opened the cloth to find a beautifully embroidered apron bearing the hawthorn crest. The stitching was delicate and precise, clearly the work of someone who cared about tradition. "It belonged to my mother," the Duke said softly. "She believed a household thrives when good hands are respected. You have earned that respect already." The room fell still. To offer such a gift to a new servant, particularly one surrounded by rumors, was unprecedented. Isabella's breath caught. She wanted to refuse, afraid of drawing unwanted envy, but the sincerity in his expression silenced every protest that rose within her. "Thank you, Your Grace," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I shall treat it with the honor it deserves." Mrs. Fenton's disapproval hardened visibly. The junior cooks exchanged glances that suggested the rumor mill would grow teeth by morning. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from delight, though she was grateful, but from the immediate awareness of how this gesture would be perceived. After the Duke departed, whispers coiled through the kitchen like smoke. A footman murmured that the Duke's attentiveness was inappropriate. One of the senior maids snickered that Isabella must be cleverer than she looked. Only Alice stood protectively at her side, muttering that people ought to mind their own affairs. Isabella kept her head lowered, polishing copper pans with deliberate calm, though each whisper tightened the knot in her stomach. The following day, when she entered the kitchen at dawn, she found the embroidered apron tossed carelessly on the floor near the hearth, its fabric smeared with soot. The sight struck her as though someone had slapped her. She crouched to gather it, her fingers trembling, yet she refused to let anger or sorrow take hold. Dignity, she reminded herself, was her only true armor. But Mrs. Fenton's arrival moments later confirmed that the act had not been accidental. The housekeeper's expression carried a warning she did not voice. The household would not easily accept Isabella, no matter her talent. Still, the apron could be washed, the crest restored, and Isabella resolved to do so without complaint. Throughout the day, tension simmered in every corridor. Servants spoke in hushed tones, and Lady Aurelia, Alistair's cousin, newly arrived for an extended stay, appeared in the kitchen under the pretense of seeking tea. Her gaze swept over Isabella with a theatrical delicacy, as though she were assessing a blemish. "So you are the cook my cousin seems unusually interested in," Lady Aurelia remarked, her tone honeyed with disdain. "I suppose skill can come from unexpected corners." Isabella bowed her head. "I serve as needed, my lady." Aurelia's smile sharpened. "Do take care your service does not overreach its place. Accidents happen in busy households." The words were a velvet thread, and Isabella felt the chill linger long after Aurelia glided away. Yet that evening, when Alistair tasted the dish she prepared, a rosemary-stewed rabbit accompanied by herb dumplings, his expression softened with unmistakable approval. He said nothing aloud, but the look he gave her, brief yet profound, strengthened her resolve. She was determined not to let Spider erode what she had begun to rebuild. As she extinguished the kitchen lamps that night, Isabella sensed that conflict had only begun to stir, but so, too, had something far sweeter. The balance between peril and possibility hung delicately around her, urging her forward while warning her to tread with care. Each step within Hawthorne Hall felt heavier now, yet also strangely hopeful, as though her fate had begun to intertwine with lives and hearts she did not yet understand. Night settled over Hawthorne Hall with a stillness so complete that even the trees outside seemed reluctant to stir. The kitchens, usually loud with clattering utensils and rapid footsteps, lay in a gentle hush broken only by the crackle of embers in the great hearth. Isabella remained alone, sleeves rolled to her elbows, finishing the last of the preparations for the next day. The solitude suited her. It allowed her thoughts to unfold freely, though tonight they weighed heavily. She kept recalling Lady Aurelia's warning, spoken with a sweetness that masked its cruelty. Every insult, every whisper, every suspicious stare she had endured here reminded her of the dangers of standing too close to those above her station, especially one as prominent as the Duke. A soft footstep broke the silence. Isabella stiffened, thinking another servant had come to fetch something, but when she turned, she saw the tall figure of Alastair Hawthorne stepping through the doorway. The firelight fell upon him in warm strokes, casting shadows that deepened the sorrows etched across his face. He wore no formal coat now, just a shirt and waistcoat, and the absence of pomp made him look startlingly human. "Forgive the intrusion," he said quietly. "I did not mean to startle you." "You did not, Your Grace." Her answer was polite, but her voice carried the truth of her unease. He approached the long wooden table where she worked, observing the neatly arranged ingredients. "You are preparing more dishes than I requested. I find it easier to begin tasks early than rush them later," she replied, avoiding his gaze. "It is simply habit, a sensible one." He paused. "May I speak with you, Miss Harcourt? Not as your employer, but as a man who wishes to understand the strain I see in your eyes." The gentleness in his tone unsettled her more than reprimand ever could. She had grown accustomed to suspicion, but not this careful attention that sought what she tried so hard to conceal. "Your Grace, I fear it is not my place to trouble you with my concerns. And yet your concerns affect my household," he said, stepping nearer. "That makes them my concern as well." She hesitated, then folded her hands, steadying herself. "The staff believes I have been shown favoritism. They resent me. I do not wish to be the cause of discord." "Resentment fades," he replied, "but your integrity does not. You have earned more trust in a few days than others have in years." Isabella shook her head. "Trust is fragile, Your Grace. One misstep, one lie, whether spoken by me or against me, is enough to shatter it." A flicker of pain crossed his features, and she realized she had touched on something far deeper in him. He rested his hands on the back of a chair, his voice low. "I know how swiftly trust can be destroyed. My late wife suffered greatly from society's cruelty. I failed to shield her from it, and I will not make the same error again." The confession startled her. She had heard whispers of the Duchess's delicate health and early death, but never imagined the Duke carried such guilt. "Your Grace, you cannot blame yourself for the past," she murmured. "And you must not blame yourself for the malice of others," he countered. "You have done no wrong." She looked away, her throat tightening. Sometimes innocence is not enough. He regarded her for several moments in silence, then spoke softly. "Miss Harcourt, I wish you would allow yourself to trust me." Her breath trembled. The way he said her name, the sincerity in his tone, threatened to unravel her composure. She forced herself to turn back to the table, lest he read too much in her face. "Trust is earned, Your Grace. I am still learning who I may safely trust." A faint, rueful smile touched his lips. "Then let me earn it." She felt warmth rise through her chest, a sensation both comforting and frightening. Before she could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor, followed by hushed but frantic voices. The spell between them dissolved instantly. Alice burst into the kitchen, breathless and pale. "Miss Isabella, Lady Aurelia has brought guests without warning. A dozen of them, and she claims you have refused to prepare refreshments." Isabella stiffened. "I refused nothing. I was not informed." She knew that. Alice whispered urgently. "She meant you to fail." The Duke's calm expression hardened into something far colder. "Where are they now?" "In the drawing room, Your Grace." Lady Aurelia said she wished your visitors to experience the household as it truly functions. The meaning hung unmistakably in the air. Lady Aurelia sought public humiliation. Isabella's pulse quickened. She had ingredients, but no time. Sabotage could come in any form: spoiled butter, hidden spices, or simply the chaos of too many demands at once. Alistair stepped forward. "Miss Harcourt, what do you need?" "Time," she admitted. "And silence." "Then time and silence you shall have." He turned toward Alice. "Keep anyone from entering this kitchen. No one is to disturb her." Alice nodded vigorously and darted away. Isabella took a steadying breath. This was no longer merely about proving her competence. It was about survival. She moved swiftly, her mind cataloging the possibilities: cucumber sandwiches, simple fruit tarts, spiced nuts, warm cider. Her hands flew over the preparations. The kitchen became alive again, knives tapping rhythmically against wood, dough rolling beneath her palms, pots clattering gently as she measured ingredients by instinct rather than thought. The Duke remained at a respectful distance, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He saw the precision of her movements, the way she balanced flavors with a kind of quiet artistry, and he understood, perhaps more clearly than ever, that her gift was something extraordinary. At last she finished. Trays laden with delicacies waited on the table, glimmering in the candlelight like small victories. When Alice returned with footmen to carry the trays, Isabella felt her tension ease slightly. She wiped her brow, her hands trembling from the rush. Alistair stepped beside her. "You faced sabotage with ingenuity. I am proud of you." Isabella lowered her gaze. "I only did what was required." "You did far more," he said, his voice softening. "And they will see it." She wanted to tell him not to place such faith in her, not when faith could be so easily shattered. Yet the sincerity in his eyes held her still. He left briefly to join his guests. Moments later, applause drifted faintly down the corridor. Isabella exhaled slowly, relief washing over her, followed by a swell of something warmer, deeper. When Alistair returned, he approached with a look she had never seen directed toward her before. Admiration mingled with something unspoken. "You saved my household tonight," he murmured. "And perhaps you have begun to save me as well." Her heart gave a painful, hopeful throb. Yet even in that moment, she knew the storm surrounding them had only begun to gather. Dawn arrived with a muted grayness that seemed to settle over Hawthorne Hall like a sigh. Isabella rose before the rest of the household, for sleep had eluded her entirely. The events of the previous evening circled through her thoughts with relentless persistence. The sabotage, the frantic preparations, the applause that drifted faintly through the corridors, and, most of all, the Duke's final words. "You have begun to save me as well." They echoed with a tenderness she had never expected, a warmth she feared to trust. Such words from a man of his stature could not mean what her trembling heart wished them to mean. Hope, she reminded herself sharply, was the one luxury she could not afford. She folded her few belongings with deliberate care, smoothing each garment until no wrinkle remained. The embroidered apron he had given her rested atop the pile, freshly laundered but still bearing a faint smudge she had been unable to remove entirely. It seemed to embody her experience here, something gifted with grace, soon tarnished by the world around it, yet still precious enough to keep. She laid it gently in her bag, though the act felt like a farewell. The decision to leave had grown through the night like a vine winding tightly around her ribs. She could not stay, not when whispers sharpened into rumors and rumors threatened to become scandal. The Duke had defended her once. She would not ask him to shoulder that burden again. His household needed peace. His reputation needed preservation. And Isabella, If she wished to escape the cruelty that shadowed her, needed distance. Distance that would sever the growing thread between them before it tightened into something impossible. She slipped quietly down the servants' staircase, hoping to avoid attention. The corridors were still, the lamps dimmed to fading embers, and the silence pressed against her like a weight. When she reached the front hall, the vastness of it overwhelmed her. High ceilings, sweeping staircases, portraits gazing down with aristocratic detachment. She felt small, insignificant, yet strangely resolved. Whatever else she lost by leaving, she would keep her dignity. The front door creaked as she eased it open. A cold mist clung to the grounds, softening the edges of the world. She pulled her shawl tighter and stepped into the morning air, determined not to look back. A carriage would pass the main road soon enough. She would ride toward London, find a small position in a modest home, and disappear into a life that asked nothing of her heart. But she had taken no more than 3 steps when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. "Miss Harcourt." The voice froze her where she stood, deep, steady, warm with familiarity. She closed her eyes, wishing she could turn to face him without betraying her turmoil. When she finally did, the Duke stood before her, breath visible in the cold air, his expression shifting from confusion to something far more pained. "You are leaving," he said, though it was not a question. "Yes, Your Grace." Her voice barely carried. "It is necessary." He approached, stopping only when her retreat forced him to halt. "Necessary for whom?" "Certainly not for me, nor for this household. For your reputation," she answered quickly. "Lady Aurelia has made her intentions clear. She wishes to frame every kindness you show me as impropriety." "I care nothing for Aurelia's opinions," he replied, his tone sharpening, "or for the murmurs of those who fear shadows more than truth. But society cares," she insisted, "and you cannot ignore society forever. I have lived my whole life beneath its judgment. I know too well how swiftly it punishes those who step beyond their place." A flicker of frustration crossed his features. "You speak as though you are a burden to me." She drew a trembling breath. "I speak as someone who owes you everything. You offer me dignity when I had none left. I will not repay that generosity by allowing my presence to bring you harm." His jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Isabella, do you believe me so weak that I would sacrifice what I value most out of fear of idle tongues?" Her heartbeat faltered. "I do not think you weak." "Then why?" he asked, his voice roughening. "Do you insist on leaving me before I can even speak the truth I have carried for days?" She stared at him, stunned. "Your Grace." "My name," he said gently. "Say my name." The request broke her composure. She shook her head, tears gathering despite her attempts to hold them back. "If I say it, I do not know if I will have the strength to go." "Then do not go." The words, spoken with aching simplicity, tore through the last of her resistance. She could not reply. Her breath hitched, and she glanced away, desperate to regain control. He reached out, slowly, giving her every chance to retreat. When his gloved hand brushed her sleeve, a tremor passed through her. "Isabella," he said, voice raw with clarity, "you have restored life where grief once lived. I do not ask you to remain out of duty. I ask because I care for you more deeply than I ought." The truth lay naked between them, unguarded and overwhelming. She whispered, "We cannot." "We can," he answered, "if you let me break the chains we both fear." Before she could form another protest, he stepped back, as though arriving at a decision that steadied him. Without warning, he turned and strode toward the stables. Isabella watched in alarm as he mounted a horse with practiced ease. "Your Grace, what are you doing?" "Following you," he said. "If you insist on leaving, I insist on accompanying you. But I would much rather ride with you to the station to ask you a question I should have asked sooner." Her pulse stumbled. What question? He met her gaze across the misty lawn, and for the first time since she had known him, a quiet, determined hope illuminated his features. "Whether you would consent to be my wife." A soft cry escaped her, not of fear, but of disbelief so profound it felt like breaking open. She covered her mouth, tears falling freely now, the weight of her loneliness collapsing beneath the force of his sincerity. Alistair. The name slipped from her lips before she could stop it. He swallowed, the sound carrying across the cold morning. Yes. Say it again, if it means you will stay. She stepped toward him, each footfall drawing her away from the life she had tried to choose and toward the one she had longed for without admitting it. If you are certain, she whispered, then I will not leave. Relief washed over his face, deep and unmistakable. He dismounted, closing the distance between them until she felt the warmth of his breath mingle with the cold morning air. I am certain of you, he said, more than anything. And as the mist curled around them like a veil, Isabella felt the fragile, impossible hope within her finally become something real, something she no longer feared to claim.